If you are visiting the stunning Canadian Rockies for the first time, be sure to watch this video because in it, I'm going to be sharing the most important tips and must-knows for you to have the best trip ever, including key dates like when campsites and shuttle tickets are released, and secret tricks to score these coveted spots even when they appear to be sold out, which is pretty much always. Now, in case you're new here, hi, I'm Christina from happytowonder.com. And this channel is all about practical travel advice from someone who's been there, done that, so be sure to like and subscribe if that sounds like your kind of thing. Now let's get started with some Canadian Rockies travel planning tips. First, just to make sure we're all on the same page, it is very important for you to realize that there is a ton to do in the Rockies, so it's in your best interest to just accept now you're not going to be able to do them all. The number one mistake most first-timers make is they try to rush through their trip. But the truth is you could live here for your entire life and still not see every single viewpoint and do every single trail. So rather than try to rush through and see as much as humanly possible, I do recommend sticking in a smaller spot and trying to explore it more in depth. Now for some extra context and to help you get your bearings, this is what the Canadian Rockies look like on a map. Most visitors end up visiting just this stretch here, which is focusing on the Canadian Rockies main national parks, in order of most visited to least being Banff, Jasper, Yoho, Kootenay, and Waterton Lakes. And sometimes people also stop in Mount Revelstoke National Park as well if BC is also part of the itinerary. Now, this might not look like a huge area on the map, but this is Canada that we're talking about. So the distances between places can actually be a lot farther than they look, bearing in mind the fact that roads weave around mountains and lakes, so it's not always going to be a direct path, and so you should definitely expect to deal with a lot of driving. From Banff to Lake Louise, for instance, it takes just under an hour to get there. So yes, don't just assume that because things look close on a map, they're going to automatically be really easy to get between, because that's not always going to be the case. Now, in terms of arriving in the Rockies, the two main airports to fly into are Calgary, which is closer to Banff, or Edmonton, which is closer to Jasper. Generally, I found that Calgary has better flight deals coming from abroad because actually Calgary Airport is WestJet's global hub. So there are lots of very affordable flights actually from big European cities and also several cities in Latin America. If your trip is limited to just Alberta, those with the flexibility might want to consider flying into either Calgary or Edmonton and then out of the other city to avoid backtracking. But if you have more time, you might actually want to consider extending your trip a little further out west towards my hometown of Vancouver. This way you can see more of what the West Coast has to offer, and I know I'm super biased, but I think it's pretty great out here, so if you have the time, it's well worth it. A very popular circular route, for instance, would actually involve adding the Okanagan, which is BC's amazing wine country, along with stops in Vancouver, Whistler, and also Kamloops / some of the cool stuff around there, like Wells Gray Provincial Park, which has tons of amazing waterfalls. Doing all that on the way back to Jasper. To be honest though, I would advise minimum 2 weeks to do this trip justice. Now, speaking of time, when it comes to a Canadian Rockies trip, timing is really everything. So do make sure you know the pros and cons of visiting in each season, as well as the risks. I have to say the Rockies are stunning no matter which season you visit, but timing is super crucial if there are certain things that you want to see or experience. If you are looking for the classic Rockies postcard views, for instance, with the turquoise lakes, and you want to see those lakes fully thawed out, then mid-June to mid-October is probably going to be your best bet. While exact thawing times do vary year by year, my recent trip during mid-May meant most of the lakes were still actually half frozen. And this did look really cool, and it was still amazing to be there, but that's not the iconic bright blue lake color that many have come to associate with the Rockies. So just know that there are pros and cons depending on when you visit. And do note that some lakes are actually inaccessible before June, so it's not just a matter of weather or how frozen the lakes are, because the road to MORAINE Lake, for instance, has actually been closed to private vehicles since 2023. And is therefore only accessible by a shuttle, which doesn't run between mid-October until June 1st. Now, if avoiding crowds is the goal, then I would suggest you avoid July and August. June will have relatively fewer crowds, and from mid-September onwards, the crowds should really start to thin out. And the bonus part about going later in the tail end of the season is if you time things right, you might actually be able to catch the stunning larch season, which is when you see these trees turn into a golden yellow. And that is usually from mid-September to early October. Now, winter in the Rockies is of course a completely different experience. But if you're into snow sports, frozen waterfalls, and you're prepared to hike with the right gear like spikes, then there is a ton to do as well. And something that has actually been on my bucket list forever is seeing the frozen ice bubbles over at Abraham Lake, which are, of course, only visible in the winter. So in summary, tons of great times to go, but do prepare yourself for what the limits of each period are to avoid disappointment. Alrighty, moving on to clarify and avoid confusion, I will also note that Jasper and Banff are national parks, but something that a lot of people get confused by is there are also towns by those names. So yes, do keep in mind there is a difference between Jasper National Park and Jasper Town, likewise with Banff National Park and Banff Town. Now, a lot of people stress about staying in Jasper or Banff, but to be completely honest with you, I think the towns are some of the least interesting parts of the Rockies. After all, you're there for the nature. So I would say if you're on a budget, consider staying in other towns outside of the main ones like Banff and Jasper. On our most recent trip, we actually stayed in Hinton as a base for Jasper, which was really great. The drive between Jasper and Hinton is honestly really beautiful. I feel like more people should know about how pretty it is. And Hinton actually has way more large supermarkets and big name stores, along with much more affordable options in terms of accommodation as well. And on this trip, instead of staying in Banff, we actually stayed in Canmore, which again was really great value and only a 25-ish minute drive from Banff. In general, we also felt the options here seemed more modern and less dated than Banff, so really it's a great option if you're looking for something a little bit cheaper. That said, if you do find something that seems a little too good to be true in terms of price, do double check the location, because if it's by the railway, which ours was, you will be hearing some very loud trains all throughout the night, so just a note if you are a light sleeper. Other good options in terms of bases include Golden, which has many activities of its own as well, so definitely keep that in mind. Now, accommodation-wise, do be aware that there are options for pretty much every budget in the Rockies, but generally stuff books up really fast and is incredibly pricey, so your best defense is really to just book ahead, especially if you are planning to stay close to any of the most popular and famous sites. Unfortunately, you should also expect value for money to be pretty lacking in these more popular areas, with even very expensive hotels feeling quite bare bones and dated. Luckily, there are options for every price point, even if the options themselves aren't the most amazing. At the top end, you have more luxurious properties like the Fairmonts, which do cost an arm and a leg, but offer an incredible experience, especially if you are staying at any of those lakeside suites at the Fairmont Lake Louise. And the bonus part of staying there is you're actually going to be able to sleep and wake up at Lake Louise, meaning you can beat the crowds and see the lake before and after they arrive. All throughout the Rockies, there are also slightly more budget-friendly lodges, hotels, and motels scattered around. But my personal recommendation is really trying to book an apart hotel or an apartment rental of some kind, simply because when you have that, then you have access to a kitchen, which can make a huge difference in terms of your budget and in terms of saving money, because dining out in the Rockies is insanely expensive. Plus, you have more space to hang out and unwind as well if you're traveling in a group. My go-to is usually hopping on booking.com to see all the different options, using filters to find what I'm personally interested in, and then checking off any key amenities. Like for me, a kitchen or laundry is usually quite important. I have a full video detailing my process for finding the best accommodation on booking.com, so be sure to check that out in case you need a bit of help. Now, if budget is a priority, there are also some hostels available in the Rockies, both in major towns and also farther out if you want to be close to that beautiful nature. Hostel World is a great website for looking those up, but do prepare yourself that even hostels are not cheap. During peak season, hostels in towns can still cost you over $100 a night for a bed in a dorm. And hostels in more remote areas will still be about $50 a night or more. So yes, cheaper, but not cheap by any means. Now, if you do plan to do any big hikes during your time in the Rockies, do know that there are also some cute mountain huts that you can book as well, though space is extremely limited, so again, planning ahead is really key here. The Alpine Club of Canada website is where you can see the different options and book, but do note that there may be a lottery system in place for some of the more popular ones, like for instance, the Elizabeth Parka Hut over at Lake O'Hara in Yoho National Park. Staying at this hut is actually one of the only ways you can access and hike this lake without getting a coveted shuttle spot, so needless to say, it is incredibly popular. Of course, there is still camping as an option as well, but for that, I say definitely plan ahead, meaning January or February, if you want to be camping during your trip in the Rockies. Now listen, I am by no means a camping expert, so I will just offer some general advice in regards to the planning aspect of camping. If you want to camp during your time in the Rockies, you really do need to plan months ahead. And this is because the Parks Canada campsites open their reservations in January and February, and unfortunately they do sell out pretty much immediately. So you need to be ready to book the minute that they're released. You can think of it as like a camping Hunger Games. Now you can actually access a full list of release dates on the Parks Canada website, so be sure to go there now and save any dates that might be relevant to you. Taking note of the fact that the time zone listed on there is Mountain Standard Time, so you don't accidentally miss it. Now, when bookings open up, you do need to say what equipment you're booking for. So let's say whether you have a small tent, a medium tent, or maybe a trailer home of a certain size. So before these bookings open up, do make sure you have a sense of the kind of gear or vehicle that you'll be camping with. Now, if this sounds like too much planning, for the more adventurous among you, there is actually another option that people don't usually talk about because honestly, it's not really for the weak. And that is to camp on Crown land or land owned by the government rather than a private individual or a corporation. And fun fact, this is almost 90% of land in Canada. That said, camping on Crown land usually means no facilities, no cell service, and you are completely on your own. Now, for those of you who are prepared to do it, this does mean utmost freedom and independence. But it's definitely not suitable for most first-time visitors, and surprisingly, contrary to popular belief, it is not always 100% free. In fact, in Alberta, you do need something called a public lands camping pass in order to camp on public land along the eastern slopes of the Rockies. As of 2026, this is $20 per person for a 3-day pass. Now, I'll once again say that I'm not a camping expert, so right now I'm just going to redirect you to some resources that can help if you want to explore this option further. Freecampsites.net has a ton of spots marked with reviews from real people so that you can actually gauge what the facilities are like or what the spots are like when you're camping in the wild. I've also heard great things about the Backroad map books if you're really looking to explore the backcountry. But I feel like that's probably not most of you, so I'll just move on. Now, I'm going to cover transport a little bit later in this video, but since we're talking about accommodation, I'd say another option is to consider a camper van or an RV to combine transport and accommodation in one go. This is a very popular way to get around the Rockies and might be well suited for people who want the experience and freedom of being close to nature, but maybe don't want to be sleeping in a tent every single night. And with traditional accommodation being as expensive as it is, bundling it with transport this way can actually work out to be a lot cheaper. Though that isn't a given, so make sure you're always doing the math before making any assumptions or bookings. On a larger scale, RVs are very popular. Canadream is probably the most popular company that you're going to encounter while you're driving around. You're going to see their RVs constantly, but there's also RVZ and Outdoorsy, which are sites that allow you to book and rent directly from van and RV owners themselves. But very importantly, do keep in mind that if you're renting an RV, you have to pay close attention to the RV size and make sure you're booking the right campsites for it. Because unfortunately, if your RV does not book the campsite that you booked, you are going to be turned away and you will be doomed to a vacation full of strip mall parking lots. Now, while we're on the topic of bookings, another thing to have on your radar is you do actually need to book parking shuttles for big lakes like Lake Moraine and also Lake Louise. If you're going to Banff National Park, you are going to want to see these two lakes. But unfortunately, so will everyone else. And so as Parks Canada say themselves, the only way to guarantee that you're going to see these lakes is by booking a Parks Canada shuttle. And you have to do this in advance because again, Moraine Lake is close to private vehicles, so you can't actually get down there on your own anyway, unless you want to cycle. And Lake Louise is generally so busy that finding parking can be a nightmare and not guaranteed either. Now, the way the shuttles work is this. You book seats for a specific day and time slot for however many people are in your party, and then you just park your car stress-free in a giant parking lot that is designated for that purpose, and then the shuttle will take you to the lakes. For those of you that want to see both lakes, aka all of you, there's also a shuttle that goes between Lake Louise and Lake Moraine, so you can do both if you have the time. You don't actually need to book a shuttle for both. Now, the problem is spots are incredibly limited and very, very competitive. There are two specific times that you can book these shuttles. The first is the day that reservations open for the entire season, which is usually in mid-April. If you know your travel plans already, do try for this date. And if you haven't planned that far in advance, you can move on to option 2, which is to book a slot 2 days prior to the day that you want to reserve that shuttle for. These extra slots open up at 8 a.m. Mountain Time, again 2 days before departure. From experience, slots go pretty much instantly, so you do want to make sure you are online at the precise moment that those tickets are released. I will say though, if you don't manage to get a spot on the initial drop, don't panic. I was recently tasked by my parents with what I thought was an impossible mission, which was to actually reserve 8 tickets on the shuttle during peak season. And while doing this, I actually discovered an incredible trick that I think is going to help you get shuttle tickets even if you don't get them on the first drop. Because yes, reservations do sell out pretty much immediately upon release, but the trick is if you wait 20 to 25 minutes after that initial drop, then carts are going to start to expire. And any bookings that weren't confirmed or checked out initially then go back into the pool. And because nobody is still hanging around refreshing at that point, you have way less competition and you're much more likely to secure a slot. Granted, the most desirable slots are usually taken up by this time, but if you have a smaller party, you might actually get lucky. This is a trick that you can also use for when you're booking campsites. Now, I know these tips are ultra specific, but this is the kind of detail I like to get into on this channel, so if you're still with me, please comment moose. Now onto another really important thing. Don't forget you'll need a pass to actually visit all the national parks during your visit. In terms of options, you can either get a daily pass or an annual discovery pass, which gives you access to 100+ parks for the entire year. Which one makes sense for you, of course, depends on the length of your trip and how many parks you're planning on visiting during your itinerary. Luckily, they make it pretty easy to figure out the best option for you. Passes aren't any cheaper if you buy them online, so if you want to make sure you get the right pass for your needs, in person it's super simple. Usually they have ticket offices at main park gates or at visitor centers, so when you get there, they're going to ask you how many people you have and also which parks you're going to be visiting and when you're planning on leaving the parks. After that, they'll figure out which pass makes the most sense for you, and that just completely takes the guesswork out of it, which is what I would personally recommend. But if you're into pre-booking, park passes can also be purchased online. Just note that you are going to have to print these out. And again, it's not actually cheaper to buy them online as far as I know. So the only main benefit with booking online in advance is maybe you'll be able to skip the line if there is one, but usually the wait isn't too bad. So just keep that in mind. If you do want to buy your tickets online, the Banff Lake Louise tourism site actually has a great page where you can enter the number of people as well as your dates, and they're going to recommend the best pass for you. So definitely check that out. I'll leave a link for that in the description. Now, I will say in the past, they've run offers like the Canada Strong Pass, which actually grants free admission and 25% off camping and overnight stays. So be sure to keep an eye out for any deals like that. All right, now it's time to talk about Canadian Rockies transport tips and getting around. First, just to get this out of the way, yes, the best way to explore and get around the Rockies is with a car. For the full experience here, you really do need a car. It's very difficult to see the highlights of the Rockies without a vehicle of some kind, so do bear that in mind. To find car rentals, I usually use Discover Cars to compare prices across various companies at the same time, but generally speaking, your best bet is to just pick one up at the airport when you arrive. An important tip though is to keep an eye on fuel and make sure you have enough of it because gas stations can be quite sparse. And we did learn this, in fact, the hard way, driving from Hinton to Banff, realizing partway through that we didn't have enough fuel to get us all the way to Jasper. And the closest gas station to us was actually back the opposite way in Hinton, so we had to double back. Now finally, do make sure you drive especially carefully at night because there is indeed a lot of wildlife around. Though I will say these days there are a lot of these cool wildlife crossing bridges that I think are a really amazing idea, and it makes it a lot safer for the animals to be crossing, though sadly this is going to decrease your chances of spotting roadside wildlife. Now the next best thing after driving yourself around the Rockies is of course to get someone else to do it for you. So yes, tours can be a good option if you're not renting your own car. Based on personal experience in other very touristy areas, smaller group tours are generally a much nicer experience, and the way that I find these is usually by hopping on Get Your Guide, which is like a marketplace for various tour companies, and you can easily browse the options from there. Now, unfortunately, I don't have any personal recommendations to give you, but if you have any good ones that you would personally recommend, be sure to let everyone else know in the comments. Now, of course, I don't like saying things are impossible, so if you are set on seeing the Rockies without a car or tour, okay, yes, I do have to say, visiting the Rockies with public transport is possible, but you just have to be very well aware of the limitations. If you're hoping to use a combination of public and private transport, then shuttle services like Brewster Express offer trips from Calgary Airport to Banff, Lake Louise, and Jasper in the summer, while other companies like Sundog Tours can get you from Edmonton Airport to Jasper. Jasper is also one of the few stops on the Via Rail Canadian route, meaning you can actually get there by train. Though beware that even the journey just from Vancouver is about 19 hours. To be honest though, public transport sightseeing is quite limited in Jasper, so unless you're happy to book some private day tours while you're there, you might want to consider sticking just to Banff, where the Rome transit network is actually really good and can take you to the main sites between Banff, Canmore, and Lake Louise. And lastly, though I sadly have no experience on board, I should also mention that the Rocky Mountaineer offers a luxury tour that includes train/bus travel. Now, this is one option that obviously doesn't come cheap, but as someone who adores train travel, I can definitely see how this in itself would be a once-in-a-lifetime experience, and definitely something worth splurging on if it's your dream. Now, having done a more budget version of a train trip across Canada, I can honestly say that the stretch between Vancouver and the Rockies is the most scenic bit. Plus, Rocky Mountaineer is the only company that does trains to and from Banff. Via Rail only goes to Jasper. So if you want to get a train to Banff, this is actually your only option. Of course, the Rocky Mountaineer is a package tour, so you get the transport via train and also day tours by bus that take you to key spots. As such, you don't get a ton of flexibility, but if ease and comfort is what you're after and you're flush with cash, just know that this is an option. Next, let's tackle some Canadian Rockies packing tips. First, be sure to pack layerable items that you can rewear with options for every kind of weather. The best way to pack for the Rockies is really to just assume that you are going to encounter pretty much every possible type of weather and temperature throughout the day. At minimum, you want to make sure you have a good waterproof outer layer and a warm option like a puffer or fleece, just because even in the summertime, after the sun sets, temperatures can really dip, and generally if you're a bit higher up in the mountains, you can get quite cold, especially once you're no longer in the sun, so you want to make sure you have something warm to wear. Now, recognizing that most cars don't have a ton of room for luggage, especially if you're traveling in a group, you might want to also maximize space by packing items that can be reworn multiple times. This way you can pack less. For this, I always swear by merino wool items because they're resistant to odor and bacteria and can be reworn multiple times without needing a wash. Packing items like this is really going to help you shrink the size of your bags so that you don't have to stress too much about how much space is left in the trunk. Now, another recommendation I have is to buy expensive items like bear spray and sunscreen in advance of your trip. Usually these items are going to be marked up significantly in tourist towns, so buying them ahead of time will really save you from some horrific sticker shock. Now, in regards to bear spray, the odds of you needing it are very slim, and honestly, if you don't know how to use it at all, having one in your bag probably won't be all that useful. But for ease of mind, I do say it's worth buying a can just in case. It is quite expensive though, so if you don't expect to be hiking very much and don't see yourself needing any bear spray in the future, then a potential thing you could look into is actually renting bear spray. But the cost of this does add up after a few days. Rent a Backpack, which is based in Canmore, has a really simple service that allows you to rent bear spray for $10 the first day and then $5 every day after that if you're looking for a simple solution. Next, I would advise you don't forget to bring some classic household items that are difficult to get small quantities of. So once again, there aren't a ton of shops and amenities once you get out of the towns in the Rockies, so you want to make sure you're well stocked. Some things I would definitely bring include a few garbage bags for the car, sandwich bags or Tupperware for snacks and food, emergency toilet paper, laundry pods or sheets if you plan to do laundry. And I know that most rental apartments come with dish soap, but maybe bring a little bit of dish soap if you have anything like water bottles or Tupperware that you might need to wash throughout your trip, like maybe in your hotel or something. I recently shared a hack on my packing channel that I actually think would work really well for a Rockies trip, and that's to simply take a sponge, squeeze a bunch of dish soap in it, leave it out to dry, and then you can cut it into little pieces, and then after that you have these tiny sponges that you can use to wash water bottles or whatever you have, and that's preloaded with dish soap so you can just use it in a pinch. Some other things I definitely wouldn't forget include large tote bags for shopping and groceries, because most places do charge extra for bags these days, and a cooler bag if you want to keep drinks and food items cold. Alright, finally, let's move on to some Canadian Rockies tips for once you arrive. Now, first of all, just because people tend to combine the two when they're doing a Rockies trip, do remember that there is a time change between British Columbia and Alberta. BC is on Pacific time, Alberta is on Mountain time, so do account for this 1 hour time difference in your plans, or you're going to be missing some dinner reservations. Another thing to keep in mind is to not just blindly trust any old blog posts or articles that you find online, because conditions can really change quite rapidly. So before you head out anywhere, do try to get the most up-to-date information possible. The different visitor centers that are scattered around the Rockies are a really great resource for this, and the Parks Canada website has a really good page that actually summarizes different trail conditions and current conditions to keep an eye out for. Now, another important thing is to prepare very well for hikes, and also don't underestimate Canadian nature. Because the Rockies are such a popular destination, oftentimes they can attract visitors who aren't super experienced hikers, or maybe people who haven't spent an extensive amount of time in the outdoors. This can lead to people being very unprepared for hikes and trails, going out in the wrong footwear, for instance. You're always going to see someone in flip-flops, or perhaps not bringing enough water. So do keep in mind that while there are some easier beginner-friendly walks at popular spots, many trails in the Rockies can be quite challenging, so do prepare accordingly. And don't trust the ratings on all trails blindly, because those are not always going to cater to your level. Now, on a similar note, do make sure that you are careful and know best practices regarding wildlife. Now, I know that bears, elk, and moose seem adorable and harmless, but their cuteness is definitely best admired from afar. No matter how cuddly they look, you definitely don't want to get too close, though the exact protocol does depend on the animals. So make sure you read up on what to do in case you come across any wildlife. With black bears, for instance, you need to make as much noise as possible so that they know to stay away from you. And don't forget to dispose of your trash properly to avoid attracting them in general. Now, the noise thing is why traveling in groups is generally recommended, because the noise naturally keeps bears away. So while you're walking around, do keep chatting, or if you're on your own, maybe do a little solo singing or thinking out loud. It's gonna seem a little crazy, but better safe than sorry. And if you're wondering, what about bear bells? Apparently those are too quiet to be heard by bears until it's too late. So yes, talking to yourself is definitely the better option. Finally, it goes without saying, never ever feed wildlife. As they often say, a fed bear is a dead bear, because feeding them gets them comfortable around people, and when that happens, unfortunately, they do get put down. So yes, admire the wildlife, but do so at a distance. Next up, do remember, leave no trace, and always remember to clean up after yourselves and keep things as you found them. Don't leave trash, don't leave toilet paper just out in the open. I would recommend always carrying a few large Ziploc bags in your pockets so that you always have an easy way to dispose of trash and take back with you until you find a proper place to get rid of it. Now, as a side note with garbage cans, oftentimes in the Rockies, you're going to encounter special garbage containers that are designed to be wildlife proof. So if you're looking at a bin and you can't figure out how to open it, do look for a graphic printed on there that shows you. Usually it's going to be on a little latch thing that you press onto in order to open it up, something that you can do and in theory bears shouldn't be able to do. And this doesn't get said enough, but the concept of leave no trace does extend beyond just picking up after yourself. It's also just the general idea of leaving places as you found them. So don't go off trail and risk trampling delicate ecosystems. And don't engage in what seems like harmless activities like stacking rocks, because it's often not just about one thing, like, oh, if I move one rock, what's the big deal? But it's really more about the kind of snowballing effect of it. So if you do it and other people do it, if everybody does it, then suddenly things like taking rocks out of a creek to build stacks can actually affect how that creek flows, or might disturb local wildlife who rely on certain things being in a certain place. So yes, try to leave things as much in their natural state as you can. Also, just FYI, sometimes rock stacks and cairns are actually used as navigational markers. So if you just randomly build them where they don't belong, then that could actually lead people astray. Now, I have said repeatedly that the Rockies are a busy destination, so this next tip is going to come in very handy. And that is to visit popular spots either very early in the day or very late in the day. Going early is no secret. To be honest, that's what a lot of people do. On my more recent trip though, I did find that going late actually worked really well in our favor as well, and this can work especially well when the days are really long, like in the summertime. So go late and who knows, you might have the place all to yourself. Now, another thing to take note of is that dinner is eaten actually pretty early in the Rockies. Most of the time kitchens do close around 9-ish, so a lot of the time you're gonna find people are eating dinner maybe around 5:30 or 6 o'clock. I know that meal times are relative, but as someone who is a pretty late eater, I did find these times pretty early. So always make sure you are researching opening hours and kitchen closing hours in advance to avoid disappointment. Now onto another thorny must know, which is that you really shouldn't forget to tip. In Canada, the standard tip around here is 15 to 20% for good service. And I know even just saying that out loud, it hurts me physically, but that is what is customary when it comes to sit-down meals. And while staff aren't likely to get aggressive with you or anything like that, under-tipping is definitely considered bad form around here, so you might get some frosty looks. Now, to give a little more insight though, while I personally really hate tipping culture, the reason many servers can get snippy if you don't tip or if you undertip is because servers here in Canada are often required to give a percentage of their bill to other staff like the kitchen staff, regardless of how much they actually get tipped. So if you don't tip enough, they effectively lose money on your table, so that might be why they are not so nice to you if you don't tip. That said, most of the time, servers make very good money anyway, so do with this information what you will. In any case, tipping on takeout or fast food is much less expected, and opinion is way more divided on whether or not it's necessary. For me personally, I tend to do about 10%, but it's definitely not as much of an expectation. Now, speaking of fast food, during your Rockies trip, supermarkets, A&W, and Tim Hortons will definitely be your best friends. While you will find a good number of restaurants and places to eat in some of the bigger towns like Jasper, Canmore, and Banff, trust me, you're gonna wanna stop off at supermarkets to grab some snacks and food for those long stretches in between where you're not gonna encounter many options at all. I always recommend stocking up on some resilient road trip snacks like jerky, any protein and cereal bars, some instant foods like noodles, anything that you can whip up or eat just in case you are starving. And even when options are available, honestly, time is of the essence, so you'll want something quick, in which case the two chains that you are most likely to encounter throughout the Rockies are Tim Hortons and A&W. Two Canadian icons. I would say the food is overall better at A&W, but it really isn't a Canadian road trip until you have an ice cap and some Timbits, so definitely take advantage of both when you see them. Now, in addition to being well stocked with food and water, do be aware that there may be big stretches without any phone service. Along the Icefields Parkway, for instance, there is a solid 100-kilometer stretch where there's no phone service at all. But honestly, don't panic about this. This is such a well-traveled road that even in an emergency situation, it's not going to be long before some other cars come along. So long as you are prepared for no service and save some offline maps, for instance, with places where you want to stop, maybe some trail maps on all trails. In a pinch, if you really need it, at Saskatchewan Crossing, there is a pub, cafe, and a massive souvenir shop where you'll find some decent bathrooms and Wi-Fi. But that is pretty much it for that entire section of the road, so do make sure you have at least some food and water, because the stuff there is very expensive. I was also able to use the satellite mode on my iPhone as well to send a text when I needed to, so just remember that that is an option in case of an emergency. Now, speaking of emergencies, another thing to be mindful of is you should definitely be strategizing your bathroom breaks if you are picky about having nicer bathrooms. Now, obviously, when you're out in nature, the toilets are rarely flushable and they aren't exactly cleaned very often. So I would definitely take full advantage of any good toilets when you have them, like at your accommodation or at a food spot, for instance. Needless to say, do always make sure you are bringing plenty of hand sanitizer, sanitizer wipes, and toilet paper. Again, you will definitely be needing them and using them a lot. All right, thanks so much for watching. Be sure to let me know in the comments if you have any other tips you want to add, and be sure to like and subscribe for more travel videos just like this one. I'll see you next time. Bye.